On the morning of her wedding day, when the sun rose soft and gold over the village, no one imagined that joy would soon twist into something whispered about for generations. The drums were already warming up. Women laughed as they tied gelly and wrapped bright fabrics around their waists, and the air smelled of shea butter, smoke, and fresh flowers. This was supposed to be the happiest day of Amara's life. She had waited for it since she was a girl, dreaming under the mango tree about love, loyalty, and a future built with honest hands. But in many African folktales, happiness is fragile, and sometimes the people closest to you carry the sharpest secrets. Amara was known in the village for her kindness. She shared food when others went hungry, listened without judging, and never forgot a favor. Her beauty was gentle, not loud, the kind that grew on you the more you looked. When Kofi chose her to be his wife, people said it made sense. He was a respected hunter, calm and steady, and together they looked like a blessing answered. Yet behind the smiles and songs, jealousy quietly took root. Not everyone celebrated with a pure heart. Some friendships, especially old ones, do not survive happiness. As Amara sat inside her mother's hut, her closest friends surrounded her. These were the girls she had grown up with, fetched water with, and shared secrets under moonlight. They teased her softly, calling her wife of the village, adjusting her beads, smoothing her hair. Their laughter sounded normal, but something about it felt thin, like a drum stretched too tight. Amara noticed it but brushed the feeling away. After all, today was her wedding day. Why would she doubt the people who had stood beside her for years? Outside, the village buzzed with excitement. Elders gathered under the big iroko tree. Children chased each other between huts, and the river nearby flowed quietly, as it always had. That river had its own stories. The elders often warned that it listened, that it remembered, and that it did not forget disrespect or broken promises. Many African tales speak of water as a living witness, but to the younger ones, those were just old stories meant to scare children. Amara had heard them too, yet she never imagined her life would cross paths with such power. One of her friends, Saad, suggested a small tradition before the ceremony. She said it was an old custom, meant to bring fertility, peace, and protection to the bride. The others nodded quickly, too quickly. They said Amara needed to wash her hands and feet in the river before walking to her husband. Just for a moment, they told her. It will bless your marriage. Amara hesitated. She had never heard of this tradition, but the confidence in their voices eased her doubt. Trust can be blinding, especially when wrapped in familiar faces. They led her toward the river, away from the crowd, away from the drums. The path felt longer than usual. Birds stopped singing, and the wind grew still. Amara's heart beat faster, though she could not explain why. She asked where everyone else was, why her mother was not with them. Her friends laughed it off, saying surprises were part of the day. In African folktales, moments like this often come quietly, before everything changes. At the riverbank, the water looked darker than usual, deep and slow. Sunlight danced on its surface, but beneath it was something heavy. Saad knelt first, touching the water, murmuring words Amara did not recognize. The others joined in, their voices low and urgent. Suddenly, Amara realized they were not blessing her. They were asking for something. Her smile faded as fear crept into her chest. She tried to step back, but hands she trusted held her in place. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice shaking. No one answered her directly. One friend avoided her eyes. Another whispered that life was not fair, that some people always got more. Jealousy spilled out in broken sentences. They spoke of Amara's happiness, her good fortune, the man who chose her when others were left behind. In that moment, love turned to resentment, and friendship revealed its hidden face. The river responded. The air grew cold, and the water began to ripple without wind. Amara felt a sharp pull in her chest, like her breath was being taken away. She screamed for help, but the sound seemed to sink into the water. Her friends stepped back, fear and regret flickering across their faces, but it was too late. The river does not stop once it answers a call. In many African tales, Magic is not kind or cruel. It simply obeys. Amara fell to her knees as her body began to change. Her skin tingled, then burned, then went numb. She cried, begging them to stop, reminding them of shared memories of sisterhood. Tears fell into the river, mixing with the water that now claimed her. Scales shimmered where her skin had been, her legs tightening, pulling together. The pain was real, but so was the betrayal. The wedding songs in the distance sounded like they belonged to another world. Her friends watched in horror as the truth of their actions unfolded. This was not a harmless trick or a jealous prayer. This was a transformation, permanent and unforgiving. As Amara's voice faded into gasps, the river surged forward, pulling her in. Where a bride had stood moments ago, there was now a fish thrashing in shallow water, eyes wide with fear and confusion. The friends ran. They fled back to the village, carrying silence and guilt instead of celebration. When the elders and the groom came searching, all they found were scattered beads near the riverbank and water that refused to speak. Kofi called Amara's name until his voice broke. The drums stopped. The wedding never happened. From that day, the river gained a new story, one told in hushed tones, especially to young girls learning the meaning of trust. But African folktales rarely end where they begin. Deep beneath the river surface, Amara was still aware. She could think. She could feel. She remembered her name, her love, and the life stolen from her. The river had changed her form, but not her soul. As she swam through shadows and light, a question echoed louder than the drums ever had. Would anyone discover the truth? Could love cross the boundary between land and water? And would the friends who betrayed her ever face what they had done? The river kept its secrets for now. And Amara's story was only just beginning. The river accepted Amara without a sound, closing over her like a secret that would not be shared. Below the surface, the world was colder and quieter, yet strangely alive. Light filtered down in broken lines, and shadows moved where roots curled and stones slept. Amara struggled at first, panic rising as her body responded in ways she did not understand. Gills opened and closed on her neck without her permission. Her arms, once decorated with wedding bangles, were now fins that trembled when she tried to reach out. Every movement felt wrong, yet somehow natural at the same time, as if the river had been waiting for her shape all along. Above the water, the village fell into confusion. Kofi refused to believe Amara had simply disappeared. He searched the paths, the forest edge, the riverbank, calling her name until night came. Elders shook their heads, whispering about bad signs and broken traditions. Amara's mother sat in her hut, staring at the wedding cloth folded neatly on her lap, unable to cry. The friends who had led Amara to the river kept their distance, their faces tight with fear. Each one carried the same secret, but none of them dared speak it aloud. In African folktales, silence can be as powerful as a curse. Days passed, and the river became the center of uneasy attention. Fishermen complained their nets came back tangled, heavy with weeds instead of fish. Children said they saw a strange shimmer in the water at dusk, something that watched from just beneath the surface. Elders warned everyone to stay away after sunset, saying the river was restless. Kofi listened to every story, his heart refusing to let go. He felt pulled toward the water, as if something there was calling him, even though he could not explain why. Beneath the river, Amara began to understand her new world. She learned how to move without fighting the current, how to hide among reeds when larger fish passed, how to follow the quiet paths where the water flowed gently. But with every lesson came a deeper ache. She remembered the weight of fabric on her shoulders, the warmth of human hands, the sound of her own laughter. At night, when the river grew still, her memories felt heavier than the water pressing around her. She wondered if anyone would ever recognize her, or if she would fade into just another tale told to scare children away from the riverbank. The river itself seemed aware of her thoughts. Sometimes the current slowed when she was tired, allowing her to rest among smooth stones. Other times, it pushed her forward, guiding her to places she had never seen before. There were deep pools where the water felt ancient, and shallow bends where moonlight reached all the way down. In those moments, Amara felt watched, not by eyes, but by something older than the village, older than the stories told by elders. The river had rules, and she was learning them without being taught. Back in the village, guilt began to rot the hearts of the friends who betrayed her. One of them, Nia, dreamed of Amara every night. In her dreams, Amara stood by the river in her wedding clothes, silent, her eyes filled with questions. Nia would wake up shaking, sweat soaking her mat. Another friend avoided water entirely, refusing to fetch it or wash near the river. They pretended nothing was wrong, but fear followed them like a shadow. They had wanted to take happiness from Amara, not become part of a curse. Kofi noticed the change in them. He saw how they flinched when the river was mentioned, how their stories never matched. His grief slowly turned into suspicion. He remembered the way Amara had been taken from the hut that morning, surrounded by those same girls. The thought that someone he knew might be responsible felt unbearable, yet it refused to leave him. In many African tales, love sharpens the senses, especially when truth is being hidden. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Kofi walked to the river alone. He knelt at the edge, the water reflecting his face in broken pieces. He spoke to it softly, as if it were a person. He told the river about his love for Mara, about the life they were meant to have. His voice trembled, and for a moment, the water stirred. Beneath the surface, Amara felt a familiar presence, a warmth that cut through the cold. She swam closer, her heart racing in a way she thought she had lost forever. She wanted to speak, to scream, to leap from the water and tell him the truth. But the river held her back. An invisible weight pressed against her, reminding her that some boundaries were not meant to be crossed easily. All she could do was circle near the surface, causing small ripples that brushed against Kofi's hands. He felt it and froze. For a brief second, their worlds touched, separated only by skin and water. Kofi pulled his hand back, breath caught in his throat. He told himself it was nothing, just his imagination fueled by grief. Yet his heart refused to accept that answer. He returned to the village with more questions than before. The river had responded to him, and that meant something. African folktales often teach that when nature listens, it is because truth is nearby. As the days stretched on, strange rules began to form around the river. No one fished there anymore. Offerings of kola nuts and palm wine appeared on the bank, placed quietly by elders seeking peace. Children were warned never to insult the water, never to throw stones without reason. The river had become more than a river. It was a reminder that unseen forces were at work. Deep below, Amara felt herself changing in ways that went beyond her body. Her thoughts slowed, then sharpened. She could sense shifts in the current before they happened, feel emotions ripple through the water like sound. She wondered if this was part of the river's gift or another layer of punishment. Was she being prepared for something, or was she simply learning how to survive her fate? The friends who caused it all stood at a crossroads, without realizing it. Each day they feared exposure, yet none had the courage to confess. They believed silence would protect them, but the village was watching, and the river was listening. In African tales, wrongdoing rarely stays hidden forever. It waits, patient and quiet, for the right moment. And beneath the surface, Amara waited too. Not with hope, not yet, but with awareness. She knew her story was still unfolding, carried by currents she did not control. The wedding day was gone, her human life suspended between memory and water. Above her, love searched. Around her, magic stirred. And somewhere between guilt and devotion, the truth was slowly rising, like breath held too long, waiting to break the surface. The river began to feel smaller to Amara, even though she knew it stretched far beyond what she could see. Each day, she swam the same paths, hid beneath the same roots, and rested near the same smooth stones. Yet her thoughts kept returning to the surface, to the village, to the life that was moving on without her. She wondered if Kofi still came to the river when no one was watching, If her mother still waited at dusk, listening for footsteps that would never return. The ache of memory became its own current, pulling her in directions she could not escape. At times, other river creatures drifted close, curious but cautious. They sensed something different about her, something that did not fully belong. Amara noticed that when she grew anxious, the water around her seemed to darken slightly, and when she felt calm, the current softened. This frightened her. She did not want power, did not want to become part of the river's mystery. She only wanted her life back. African folktales often warn that magic answers emotions before words, and Amara was beginning to understand why that was dangerous. In the village, the elders argued quietly among themselves. Some believed Amara's disappearance was the result of envy, a force as old as the land itself. Others suspected the river had been offended, perhaps by a broken vow or a forgotten offering. No one said the word betrayal out loud, but it hovered in every conversation. The friends stayed silent, nodding along, their hearts pounding whenever the river was mentioned. Each of them feared that if one spoke, all would fall. Mia's guilt grew heavier with each passing day. She began to avoid gatherings, her once bright laughter replaced with a distant stare. At night, she returned to the riverbank alone, whispering apologies into the darkness. She begged the water to forgive them, to undo what had been done. But the river does not respond to regret easily. Beneath the surface, Amara felt those whispers like soft vibrations, confusing and painful. She sensed the apology but not the courage behind it. Kofi, meanwhile, followed his instincts. He noticed small details others ignored. How the friends never fetched water together anymore. How they flinched when elders spoke of curses. He remembered the morning of the wedding, the way Amara had been taken aside without explanation. His grief sharpened into quiet determination. Love, in many African tales, becomes a form of sight when truth hides itself well. One afternoon, Kofi spoke with an old woman who lived near the edge of the village. She was known for listening more than speaking, for knowing stories that were not written down. She told him that water keeps what it is given, whether willingly or by force. She said that when a soul is bound to the river, it does not mean the soul is gone, only changed. Her words filled Kofi with both fear and fragile hope. If Amara still existed in some form, then perhaps the story was not over. Under the water, Amara encountered a deeper part of the river she had avoided until then. The current there was slow and heavy, and the light barely reached. As she swam through it, she felt surrounded by memories that were not hers. Echoes of laughter, sorrow, anger, and longing wrapped around her like mist. She realized the river carried many stories, not just her own. Some were centuries old, others recent, all bound together by emotion. The thought unsettled her. Was she becoming part of this endless collection? Sometimes, she felt an urge to rise to the surface, to reveal herself to whoever stood near the bank. Other times, fear held her back. What if she frightened them? What if they tried to capture her, not knowing who she was? The river seemed to sense her hesitation and kept her just far enough below the surface to remain unseen. Suspense lived in every movement, every choice she did not make. The friend's secret began to crack in small ways. One of them, Ao, fell ill, her body weak, her dreams filled with water. She spoke in her sleep, murmuring Amara's name, calling herself a thief of joy. Her mother grew worried and sought the elders, hinting that something unnatural was at work. Panic spread quietly among the girls. They realized the curse, if that was what it was, might not be finished with them. As the village prepared for a seasonal festival meant to honor the ancestors, tension thickened the air. Festivals were times when truth often surfaced, when spirits were believed to walk closer to the living. The elders planned offerings at the river, hoping to restore balance. Kofi volunteered to help, placing himself once again near the water that haunted his thoughts. Beneath the surface, Amara felt the preparations like distant thunder. Something was approaching, though she did not know what it would bring. She wondered if the river had chosen her for a reason beyond punishment. Was she meant to witness something, or to become a warning? The thought frightened her, yet it also sparked a quiet strength. She refused to believe her story ended in silence. Even if she could not speak, even if she could not return, she would remember who she was. In African folktales, identity is often the last thing taken and the first thing reclaimed. On the night before the festival, the river grew restless. The current shifted unpredictably, carrying scents from the land above. Amara sensed many people nearby, their emotions spilling into the water. Fear, hope, guilt, love. She hovered close to the surface, torn between hiding and revealing herself. Above her, voices murmured prayers, and offerings touched the water gently. The friends stood among the crowd, hearts racing, unsure whether to stay or run. Each of them felt the weight of the moment pressing down, as if the river itself was watching, waiting. Kofi stood closest to the edge, his eyes fixed on the water, his chest tight with emotion he could not name. And beneath them all, Amara waited, suspended between two worlds. The river held her steady, not letting her rise, not letting her sink. The truth was close now, close enough to feel, but still just out of reach. Whatever would come next had already begun to move, carried by currents older than jealousy, stronger than fear, and patient enough to let the tension grow until it could no longer be contained. The night of the festival arrived with a heavy stillness, the kind that makes even familiar places feel different. The moon hung low over the village, casting pale light on faces filled with hope and fear. Drums began to beat slowly, not in celebration, but in respect. Elders moved with careful steps, carrying offerings meant to calm unseen forces. The river reflected the moon like a watchful eye, quiet but alert, as if it knew this night mattered. Amara felt everything at once. The vibrations of the drums traveled through the water, reaching her body and settling deep inside her chest. Each beat echoed like a heartbeat, steady but tense. She swam in small circles beneath the surface, drawn closer to the sounds above. Memories rushed back to her. The songs of her childhood, the laughter of women dancing, the promise of the wedding that never happened. Her emotions stirred the current, and the river responded with slow, deliberate movement. On the bank, Kofi stood apart from the others, his attention fixed on the water. He felt it again, that pull stronger than before. Every instinct told him Amara was near, even though his mind argued against such a thought. He clenched his fists, unsure whether to speak, to pray, or to remain silent. In many African folktales, moments like this are tests of faith, when belief must stand alone without proof. The friends stood together, their faces pale in the moonlight. None of them spoke, but their shared fear bound them closer than friendship ever had. Nia's hands trembled as she held a small offering, her lips moving in silent apology. Ao leaned heavily against another, her strength not fully returned. They felt exposed, as if the river could see straight through them, reading every jealous thought and selfish wish that had led to this night. As the elders stepped forward, the drums stopped. The sudden silence pressed down on everyone, making the air feel thick. An elder began to speak, his voice low and steady, calling on the ancestors to witness, to listen, to restore balance. He spoke of broken trust, of envy that poisons the heart, of water that remembers every tear. His words carried across the riverbank, sinking into the water like stones. Below the surface, Amara froze. Each word felt directed at her pain, at her unanswered questions. The river around her grew warmer, then colder, as if reacting to the elder's call. She felt herself being gently pushed upward, closer to the surface than ever before. Panic and hope collided inside her. Was this her chance, or just another reminder of what she had lost? Small ripples appeared on the river, spreading outward in perfect circles. People noticed and murmured among themselves. Kofi stepped closer, his breath shallow. He remembered the way Amara used to stand near water, thoughtful and calm. The memory tightened his chest, and without thinking, he spoke her name aloud. The sound of it carried across the water, soft but clear. Amara heard him. The sound cut through the river like light, sharp and undeniable. She swam upward until her back nearly touched the surface. For a brief moment, her shadow passed just beneath the moon's reflection. Some in the crowd gasped. Others leaned forward, unsure of what they were seeing. The tension rose, thick and electric, as if the night itself was holding its breath. The elders exchanged glances, sensing something unexpected. One of them raised a staff, signaling for silence. The river stirred again, stronger this time, the current shifting in a way that felt purposeful. Leaves and small offerings floated toward the center, gathering as if guided by an unseen hand. African folktales often speak of nature responding when truth draws near, and the signs were impossible to ignore now. The friends felt it too. Mia's knees buckled, and she nearly fell. Ao began to cry, her sobs quiet but uncontrollable. The weight of their actions pressed down on them, heavier than fear of punishment. They realized the river was no longer just a place. It was a witness, and witnesses do not forget. Amara hovered just below the surface, her heart pounding. She could see shapes now, feet at the edge of the bank, reflections of faces leaning close. The urge to break through, to reveal herself fully, burned inside her. But the river held her still, as if asking a question without words. Was she ready for what would follow? Was the world above ready to face the truth? Kofi knelt at the river's edge, his hand hovering over the water. He whispered Amara's name again, his voice breaking. Tears fell from his face into the river, sending tiny ripples outward. Amara swam toward them, feeling the warmth of his sorrow. For the first time since her transformation, she felt truly seen, even if he did not yet understand why. The elder's voice rose once more, stronger now, calling for whatever was hidden to reveal itself. The drums resumed, faster, louder, matching the racing hearts of everyone present. The river responded with a sudden surge, water lifting and falling in slow waves. Gasps filled the air as something moved beneath the surface, just out of clear view. Amara felt herself being pulled forward, caught between the river's will and her own longing. Her body trembled as she rose higher, her form almost breaking through the surface. She sensed that whatever happened next would change everything, her fate, the village, the friends who betrayed her, and the man who still loved her. The water shimmered, light dancing wildly as the current swirled. The crowd leaned in, fear and wonder mixing on their faces. The truth was right there, trembling beneath the surface, ready to rise. And as the river surged one more time, carrying Amara with it, the night reached its most fragile moment, poised on the edge of revelation, where silence and sound collided, and nothing could ever return to the way it was before. The river surged once more, but instead of revealing Amara, it pulled her back with sudden force. The water darkened, swirling faster, as if something deeper had awakened and decided the moment was not yet right. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the surface calmed, leaving only scattered ripples and unanswered questions. The tension snapped tight, like a rope stretched to its limit, and fear replaced the wonder that had begun to grow. The elder lowered his staff slowly, his face troubled. He spoke in a hushed voice to the others, warning that the river was resisting. In African folktales, when water pulls back at the edge of truth, it means another debt remains unpaid. The ancestors had listened, but they were not satisfied. Something else had been taken, something deeper than envy, and it demanded recognition before any balance could be restored. Beneath the surface, Amara struggled against the current, confusion flooding her heart. The river felt different now, heavier, more demanding. A presence wrapped around her like cold hands, not cruel but firm, guiding her away from the surface. She sensed that the river had accepted her, but it was not finished with her story. She was not just a victim of betrayal anymore. She was becoming a keeper of something the village had forgotten. Far downstream, beyond where the village children were allowed to go, a deep rumble echoed through the water. Amara felt it before anyone else did, a vibration that carried old memories and unfinished promises. The river was calling on something ancient, a law older than the elders, older than spoken tradition. It reminded her that transformation always comes with a price, and that price had not yet been paid. On the bank, panic spread quietly. Some villagers began to step back, crossing themselves or murmuring protective words. Others leaned closer, desperate for answers. Kofi remained where he was, his eyes locked on the water, refusing to move. His heart told him Amara was still there, closer than ever, and further away at the same time. Then the old woman from the edge of the village stepped forward. Her voice cut through the murmurs, calm but sharp. She said the river was not angry with Amara. It was angry with the lie. A lie strong enough to bend water and steal a life could not be undone by offerings alone. In African folktales, truth must be spoken by those who hid it, not by those who suffered from it. The friends felt the weight of her words fall directly on them. Nia's breathing grew uneven, and Ao clutched her arm as if to keep herself from collapsing. The river stirred again, this time sending a narrow stream of water toward where they stood. It soaked the ground at their feet, dark and cold, as if marking them. Whispers spread through the crowd as people noticed where the water had chosen to reach. Amara felt a sharp pull in her chest as the river reacted to the shift above. She sensed the fear of the friends, the rising awareness of the village. The river pressed images into her mind, memories of that morning, the laughter that hid jealousy, the words spoken at the riverbank. It was as if the river wanted her to remember every detail, not to torment her, but to prepare her. Kofi looked toward the group of friends, following the direction of the water's movement. His eyes narrowed as pieces finally began to connect. The way they had avoided him, the way they flinched at the river's name. His voice shook as he asked where they had taken Amara that morning. The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Before anyone could answer, the river surged again, stronger than before. The water rose higher, splashing against the bank, forcing people to step back. In the chaos, Amara was carried forward once more, closer to the surface than she had ever been since her transformation. Her fins brushed the air, and for a heartbeat, her eyes broke through the water. Someone screamed. The crowd froze as they caught a glimpse of something impossible, eyes that were not just those of a fish, but filled with recognition, pain, and memory. Kofi's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the water, his mind struggling to accept what his heart already knew. But before anyone could move, the current snapped back again, pulling Amara under with a force that sent waves crashing against the shore. The river was not finished. It had shown just enough to ignite fear, doubt, and truth. The second plot twist settled over the village like a storm cloud. Amara was alive, but not as they understood life. The betrayal was real, but not yet confessed. And the river had made one thing clear: it would not release her, or its secrets, until every lie was dragged into the open, no matter the cost. As the water slowly calmed, the village stood divided between belief and denial. The friends trembled, knowing the river had pointed directly at them. Kofi stood frozen, torn between hope and horror. And beneath the surface, Amara floated in the darkening current, realizing that her story was no longer just about a wedding day gone wrong. It was about truth, sacrifice, and a river that demanded justice before mercy. The river did not stay calm for long. As the crowd stood frozen, the water began to rise again, this time slowly, deliberately, as if giving everyone a final chance to understand what was happening. The elder raised his hands, his voice shaking as he called for truth. He said the river had spoken clearly enough. Someone had offered a human life in exchange for jealousy, and until that truth was faced, the river would not rest. The silence that followed was heavier than any drumbeat. Nia broke first. She fell to her knees, her voice cracking as the words spilled out of her. She confessed how envy had poisoned her heart, how seeing Amara chosen, loved, and celebrated made her feel small and forgotten. She admitted they had followed an old, forbidden charm they barely understood, believing it would only delay the wedding, embarrass Amara, maybe humble her. She swore they never meant for the river to take her forever. As she spoke, the other friends collapsed beside her, crying, confirming every word. The lie that had held the village hostage finally shattered. The river reacted instantly. The water surged upward, swirling violently, but this time it did not pull Amara away. Instead, it lifted her. Slowly, carefully, as if correcting a wrong, the river carried her toward the surface. Gasps turned into screams as Amara rose fully into view, half in water, half in air. Her body was still that of a fish, shimmering under the moonlight, but her eyes were unmistakably human. They searched the crowd until they found Kofi. He stepped forward without fear. Tears streamed down his face as he reached into the water. The elders shouted warnings, but Kofi did not stop. He spoke Amara's name again, not as a question this time, but as a promise. The moment his fingers touched her scales, the river stilled completely. The drums stopped on their own. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Amara felt warmth spread through her, starting from where Kofi touched her and moving through her entire body. The river loosened its grip, and for the first time since her transformation, she felt light. Pain and fear faded, replaced by a deep, aching relief. The water glowed faintly, and as the crowd watched in stunned silence, Amara's body began to change again. Scales softened into skin. Fins trembled and reshaped into arms. The river lowered her gently onto the bank, where she lay gasping, human once more. The transformation was slow, almost respectful, as if the river wanted everyone to witness its judgment and its mercy. When it was done, Amara lay still, wrapped in moonlight and wet earth, breathing. Kofi fell beside her, holding her as if afraid she might vanish again. The village erupted in cries, some of joy, some of fear, some of disbelief. Amara opened her eyes and looked around, her face calm but changed. She saw her mother rushing forward, the elders standing stunned, and the friends who had betrayed her shrinking under the weight of what they had done. The elder spoke again, his voice firm now. He declared that the river had accepted the confession and returned what was taken, but balance always comes with consequence. The friends were not struck down or cursed. Instead, the river marked them with truth. From that day forward, they would never be able to hide envy or betrayal. Their words would always reveal their hearts, making deceit impossible. It was a punishment meant to last a lifetime, not in pain but in exposure. As the village began to breathe again, believing the story had reached its end, the river shifted once more. Amara sat up suddenly, a strange stillness settling over her. She turned toward the water, her expression unreadable. The elder froze, sensing something was not finished. Amara stood slowly and stepped back toward the riverbank. Kofi reached for her, confused, but she gently pulled her hand away. She said the river had not returned her freely. She told them that while she had been beneath the water, she had learned things meant for no single person to hold. The river had shared its memories, its warnings, its anger. It had returned her body, but it had claimed part of her spirit. From that day on, she would never fully belong to land or water. When the river called, she would have to answer. As if responding to her words, the water rippled softly at her feet. The village stood silent, realizing the cost had been higher than they first believed. Amara was alive, human again, but changed forever. She turned to Kofi, her eyes filled with love and sorrow. She told him she still loved him, but their life would never be simple. The river would always be part of her story. Then came the final twist. The old woman stepped forward and bowed her head. She revealed that the charm used by the friends was never meant to harm Amara. Long ago, it was created to choose a guardian for the river when greed and envy threatened the land. The river had not acted in anger alone. It had chosen Amara because her heart, even in betrayal, remained pure. Amara was not just a victim. She was now the river's chosen voice. The water shimmered one last time, calm and clear, as if sealing the truth. The village understood then that the story would be told for generations, not just as a warning about jealousy, but as a reminder that love, truth, and sacrifice shape destiny in ways no one can control. As dawn approached, Amara stood between river and village, human feet on land, eyes reflecting water. Her wedding day had ended in loss, but her story had become legend. And as the river flowed on, quiet and watchful, everyone knew this was not an ending, but a beginning that would never be forgotten. The days that followed felt quieter, as if the village itself was recovering from a long-held breath. The river returned to its normal rhythm, flowing steady and calm, but no one treated it the same again. People approached it with respect, lowering their voices, teaching their children to greet the water before touching it. The story of Amara spread beyond the village, carried by travelers and traders, becoming one of those African folktales told slowly by firelight, not to frighten, but to teach. Amara stayed with her mother at first, rebuilding her strength and grounding herself in the simple routines of human life. Walking felt strange again, as if her feet remembered the pull of water. At night, she dreamed of currents and moonlight, of voices that spoke without sound. When she woke, she felt both relief and loss. She was grateful to be human, to feel warmth and touch again, but she could not deny that the river still lived inside her. Kofi remained close, patient in a way only true love can be. He did not push her with questions or demands. He listened when she spoke and stayed quiet when she did not. Slowly, they learned how to be together again, not as they were before, but as two people changed by truth. Amara told him what the river had shown her, memories of broken promises, warnings about greed, and lessons about balance. He believed her without hesitation, knowing that love sometimes means accepting what you cannot fully understand. The friends who betrayed her faced their new reality with heavy hearts. The river's mark was real. Whenever jealousy crept into their thoughts, their words betrayed them. They could no longer pretend kindness when bitterness lived inside. At first, this brought shame, but over time, it became a lesson. They learned to confront their feelings instead of hiding them. Some left the village, unable to live with the constant exposure. Others stayed, slowly becoming more honest, more careful with their hearts. The village watched and learned alongside them. The elders recognized Amara's new role, though they never named it openly. She was not a priestess or a queen, but when disputes arose involving water, land, or broken trust, people sought her out. She listened more than she spoke, guiding others toward truth without force. She understood now that power did not always roar. Sometimes, it flowed quietly, shaping everything in its path. There were moments when the river called to her strongly, especially at dusk. During those times, Amara would walk to the bank alone, letting her fingers trail through the water. She never entered it fully again, but she did not fear it either. The river had taken something from her, yes, but it had also given her clarity. She knew who she was, and more importantly, who she would never become. Kofi asked her one evening if she still wished for the wedding they never had. Amara smiled softly, a smile shaped by everything she had endured. She told him she still wanted a life with him, but not one built on forgetting. They would marry quietly, without grand celebration, honoring not just love, but truth. And so they did, by the river, with elders and family present, offering thanks instead of demands. The ceremony was simple, but deeply felt. As they stood together, the river flowed peacefully beside them, reflecting the sky. No drums sounded that day, only the natural rhythm of water and wind. It was enough. The village felt a sense of closure settle over it, like a wound finally healing. In time, the story stopped feeling heavy. It became wisdom instead of pain. Mothers told their daughters about Amara, teaching them that envy can destroy what it touches, and that true friendship is tested by happiness, not hardship. Fathers told their sons that love listens and waits, and that courage often means standing alone at the edge of doubt. As for Amara, she lived a full life, marked by both joy and quiet responsibility. She laughed again, danced again, and learned that scars do not erase beauty. Sometimes, when the moon was bright, children claimed they saw a shimmer in the river that looked like her reflection, even when she was nowhere near. Amara never confirmed it, but she never denied it either. When she grew older, she sat by the river more often, watching it flow past generations that did not know her pain firsthand. She felt peace in knowing her story had meaning beyond herself. She had been betrayed, transformed, and chosen, not to suffer forever, but to remind others of the cost of jealousy and the power of truth. And so the river continued its journey, carrying memory and warning in equal measure. The village lived on, wiser than before. And Amara's story ended not with loss, but with understanding, a reminder that even when love is tested in the deepest waters, it can rise again, changed but unbroken.